Welcome back to this week's episode of I'm Set, the podcast. We have LaVonne Idlette joining us. She is an Olympian. She is an investor. She also is a mommy, a new mommy. We're excited to have her. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us, LaVonne. Such a pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
So, not often that we see, women get celebrated in sports, and you obviously had a really successful career, and we just wanted your perspective on that and, how you transition from sports into your new world of, investing and motherhood.
Yeah, so as an athlete, I've always sort of been athletic. So I already knew that I was going to be an athlete. I didn't necessarily know where that path was going to take me. So I went to Hampton University on a full scholarship to run track where, it's an HBCU, so I did almost every event possible. And then I transitioned into being a professional track and field athlete. I moved down here to South Florida and went to graduate school at the University of Miami at first, which was really an interesting transition because going from an HBCU to training at a very, very nice PWI was a huge transition. I'm like, wait, they've got really nice facilities. They got people making snacks. Like, what is this? But it was awesome. I also wouldn't trade my college experience either. So, me and my teammates have been in each other's weddings, and we're still friends. And I graduated almost 20 years ago. So that was great. And then, but I always sort of consider myself more like a nerd who happens to be fast. So I went to graduate school and law school while competing. And so my transition, I would say, was completely different than most athletes because I was always sort of in the mindset that, I was running track because I enjoyed it and I got to travel the world business class for free, but the money isn't that great. So you already know you're going to have to do something when you retire. So after my first year of law school, I did go to the 2012 Olympics in London, which was great. I did the 100-meter hurdles, and at that same time, I started a mortgage company with my father, who is a developer. So that's very much him being the brain and me Pinky, and he's just sort of you will take over the world. But being in the Olympics and law school at the same time sort of gave me a window where I met lots and lots of athletes from all over the world, but a lot of American NBA players, and they were like, wait, you're in law school? You want to come to this meeting with me? Can you tell me what they're talking about? And that's sort of how the company that I've built now started, which was very much just going to meetings and being a buffer and being like, okay, this is what this means. This is what they're telling you this investment is, but these projections are wrong, and this math is wrong. It's just being that it's okay to say no. And okay, I have a whole service. It's like a buffer to just be nah, we're all set. And so that's sort of how I grew. And I retired from track and field in 2017. And the main reason was because I missed practice twice, which most people would say that's not a big deal. But when you run track, you are basically butt naked all alone, and the difference is hundredths of a second. So if you can skip practice, you're mentally just not there anymore. And I just realized, and at the time I owned a PR firm with my cousin, and I was doing some other things. So I was very much more starting to turn the corner of I'm way more interested in business than competing. And I basically just did go back to practice after that, and I removed myself from the drug testing list, and that's what retirement is from track and field. It's not there is no pension, there is no other side of the road. It's a worldwide sport, so it's not really regulated. So it's just well, I decided I ain't running no more, and I didn't actually tell anybody besides the drug testing people until a whole year later, because I was still in the middle of some sponsorship deals. So I had to at least act like I was going to practice and do content and all kinds of stuff like that. Because it's a sponsor-based sport, so you survive by just being the face of some products. And luckily, for me, I always was a more business savvy sort of person. So I'm all right, here's my deck. I'm reaching out to people like, this is what I got on social. This is what I have on LinkedIn. This is what I have on Facebook. This is what I have on Instagram and Twitter. And this is my sphere of influence. I think I do great with your brand. And so, like, I had a whole bunch more deals than, like, people who were on paper better than me, like, from a sports perspective. But what I realized in sports a long time ago was we are the only people who actually care about outcomes. Most people who watch sports don't know enough to care about outcomes. So, like, oh, you win or you lose. Like, what time you ran, nobody knows, nobody cares. Like, so it's more about, like, people buying into you as a personal brand and, like, loving your story and being connected to you. That's why track is not as popular as it should be in the U.S., I think. It's just because people don't know people who run track. So, like, you have Usain Bolt, you got Allison Felix, if you really follow, and then, like, name 5 more.
And, you know, we know the few that we know in track and field, we know because, you know, maybe like the Shade Room puts them out, you know, Jakari Richardson, because they talk about her a lot. Or, you know, now Sydney McLaughlin, is that her name? She has an ESPN commercial coming out. So I'm like, oh yeah, that girl that, you know, broke a world record.
And she broke the world record 3 times, and she had a dominant 2-year season. I mean, it takes, like, you're in the ESPN thing to make people really know who you are.
Right.
Which is crazy because I thought about it from the perspective of 2018. I was on The Amazing Race, which comes on CBS, with a teammate of mine from college. We went to the Olympics together. After we filmed that, we were both in Runner's World. We were not in Runner's World when we were actually running.
That's amazing. Wow. So I heard someone say that track is the only real sport. Everything else is just a game.
Interesting.
And you just mentioning that it's half a second. Like, you are really literally running to, of course, beat other people's time, but do better than you did the last time.
Yes.
What was it that made you say, well, you know what, I don't want to go to practice anymore? What do you feel like got you to that point where you're just like, I don't have the love?
Bless you. Bless you. It's very much like the difference between, I know a lot of people who feel like this way in general about their job. So you go to work, and you're like, what do I have to show for it that, like, actually makes any sense? And then you are, like, looking at something else that's, like, bringing you much better returns, and then you're like, okay, let me focus where I'm getting the better return. That's pretty much what was happening, because at the time we had really great contracts with Love and Hip Hop for that PR firm that I had, and so we were traveling, we had all these clients, and so I'm like, 1 month, we're making more than I make in a whole season for running track, which requires me to travel every day, basically, like long haul flights. So we're talking, I have a flight in Tokyo. It takes 14 hours to get there. You race for 12 seconds, and then you fly back to America. Wow. And so just like use of time, I just realized, like, okay, I think I'm cool. And at that point, it had been 10 years, so I had been to pretty much every place that has track meets in the world, and yeah. And it's not that I didn't have more to prove per se, but it was like, all right, it's a world championship year, which is the 2 years that book in the Olympics, but then am I going to get better if I skip practice? No.
Right. Who would you say inspired you?
So when I was really, really young, I started wearing these really long nails because I really loved Gail Devers. Like, I wanted to be Gail Devers so bad. And she was like a sprinter and a hurdler. So I loved her, and I loved this guy named Terrence Trammell. So I had these, he had exclusive spikes, like one-of-ones. He only made 100 of them. They were blue and gold. And I wanted to, like, he's a hurdler who was a world champion at the time, and I was just like, those are my two. I loved FloJo in general, but she was a little bit pre my real era of following track. So I just liked that she was pretty, and, like, it made me start paying attention, like, okay, female athletes, they be doing it, okay. And it's not the story that people give you, which is like, you know, if you're too muscular, people aren't gonna like you. If you're too whatever, because in general, in women's sports, you're not allowed to be anything but, like, friendly to each other without, like, getting controversy. So you can't be like, well, I don't like her and I'm gonna beat her in the race. People will get on ESPN and be like, she's a bad sport. But if men do it, they're like, Yeah, look at being competitive.
Yeah, yeah.
Speaking of that, right?
Absolutely.
We saw a clip of a tennis player who got angry and he broke about 3 racks. And, we said it amongst ourselves that if someone like Serena Williams did that, then it would have been a huge, huge issue because it would have showed her being angry. And, what is your take on that? Because we feel as though, like, the men in sports get more leniency with doing certain things, but if a woman in sports do it, then it's a big controversy.
Yeah, I think that they create the idea that women competitors are supposed to be friends, that we're supposed to do everything with grace, and that being competitive is petty when it comes from a woman. But they let men do whatever, like talk trash, get into a fight, and they're like, yeah, we love him. And even over the pettiest stuff, like you haven't heard much more about, Draymond hitting the guy in practice. Like, if that was a woman at practice, that would make 17 news cycles for the rest of the year because she's petty and she should lose all of her sponsorships because she's not a good sport and a bad teammate.
Well, did you ever have a situation where you felt like maybe there was some energy that was maybe just a little bit off, that you knew that you were this competitor,
So,
but you didn't want to be petty?
I am like the most easygoing person ever. So it's like really hard. Like my coaches used to be so mad because I'm like the person that's like, yeah, girl, you can like warm up on my hurdles. I don't care. He's like, so I don't feel like I was ever that way, but I definitely have seen other people be on some like, oh, that person is still in my drills, or like they just don't like each other, and then it turns into a thing that gets blown way out of proportion, and like really, it's never as big as they make it seem. So like after the Olympics, so the girl who I did the Amazing Race with, her name is Kelly Wells, and she got a bronze medal, and her and Dawn got on TV on America's Good Morning America the next day, and they mentioned, how they were upset that everybody keeps talking about Lolo Jones because she got fourth, and like, why y'all not talking about us?
Right.
That made them, they were like, oh, you're so negative. You don't know how to win with grace. Like, first of all, we beat her and y'all keep talking about her. Like, why is that the take that you got from what we said? And so I feel like that happens so often that it just makes women be like, you know what, fine. Like, I was never the person who understood, like, one of the things that happens in track that everybody does after you win a race, you walk over and you're supposed to hug and, like, shake hands. I refuse. Like, I didn't participate in none of that. Maybe that makes me petty. I'm just like, I mean, if I lost, I don't want to shake your hand. If I won, hey, y'all. But I don't want to walk around and shake hands. I think it's weird.
You see when guys do it, I mean, they might mention it. Stephon Diggs, during the playoffs, when they lost, he was pissed, and he just walked out the stadium like, I'm leaving. I don't want to stick around for any of this. Yeah. I don't want to hear what the coach has to say because what's he really going to tell me? And they might have mentioned it like, I heard about it one day and then didn't hear about it again. Yeah. But, you're right. If a woman does something like that, God forbid. So how do you guys deal with that? Like, not being able to show your emotion when you really want to? Because has there ever been a time where you were just like so angry, but you really couldn't let it out?
I don't think I've had that happen to me specifically because the one thing about track is you're running in your own lane by yourself and you're really racing yourself. There are other people there, but if you do what you're supposed to do, you can still have a great race and you can still win or lose or whatever the case. But there are definitely those other races where like relays and like the mile where they be bumping each other and doing stuff. And I know that they want to fight each other afterwards, but they sort of avoid it because, the last thing you want to do is be like the ESPN ticker person. Like, including like,
unless it's good.
Exactly. The tennis player, the young tennis player, what is her name? Not wanting to play because she's like, I have mental health and like whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. And being like everybody bashed her, like the audacity of you not to just show up for your job, like what?
So what do you think about that?
I think that sports and I just think that everything in general is not forgiving enough of people's ability to be human. And to just be like, today is not the day and I don't want to talk to you. And like that's the one bad part I would say about the media in general. It's just like there's such an expectation to share everything of yourself when you are a public figure. To the point where like if you just lost a game, clearly you know I'm going to be mad and you're trying to get those takes because you think that's going to make you have a better rating than others. Versus like understanding you're going to get what you're going to get, but don't be mad that you got it. And that's always been the hard balance where I loved being a track and field athlete because you're just completely unknown in America altogether and you can like live your life and nobody's ever going to bother you because I watch. And especially like clients of mine where you're like, bro, we're literally having dinner and you just really, people just keep coming over here talking over your food. And then if you say anything for the 22nd person, they'd be like, asshole. Like 22 people just talked over my steak, but I'm the asshole because nobody respects boundaries.
Okay, with you saying that, let's bring up Jakari Richardson, right? Now, everyone gave her a lot of backlash for just expressing how she felt about the media and just her, of course, we witnessed her lose bad, right? And she didn't really care to speak to them and, you know, she kind of lashed out and everybody just painted her as this person who was immature, who wasn't ready. So do you think that was just a lack of PR training or the media or people, period, just not giving her the space to be human?
Yeah, I think that we definitely don't give athletes the grace to grow. She is very young. She is also not media trained. So then you like add that to emotion and then you're just like, we're not giving them the grace to grow older and learn how to deal with adversity and people talking about you or whatever the case may be. 2 million mentions on Twitter that to call you a drug addict, like all of the things that like if you were an individual and how you would take that, most people don't look at it from their own lens because most people I know be like, I got 3 negative comments. I'm so sad. Let alone thousands of people who are basically like, kill yourself, you're terrible, that's why you ain't on the team. And how to deal with that and how to navigate that, especially when you have a lot of other things going on in your life. And that's what, I just don't think that athletes get enough grace in general to grow as people because they're 19, 20, 21, 25, you know what I'm saying? And thrown into the spotlight and assumed to be the adult now. Like,
if you look at even like LeBron James, like he has been the epitome of perfection when it comes to his career. Like the media training, it seems like he always had it. Like he always had the swag that was necessary to navigate this life. But like you said, most of these kids. They're coming into the sport when they're 18, 19, you know, they're not even sniffing 25. They can't legally rent a car. But we expect them to have like, you have it all together. So, you know, how do you get that? Like, is it something, you know, obviously put LeBron aside because he's an anomaly, but how do you get that at such a young age?
I actually really worry about stuff like that because I look at people who were models of sports, which is like Tiger Woods. And then you're like, all of the pressure to be perfect creates this like secret life that you have going on. And so I worry about when people are trying too hard to be too perfect, too young, and not giving themselves space to be young, make mistakes. I think emotional regulation is something that you can grow and your parents can help you with and just like over time. But I really think that player development, especially within leagues and teams, should spend more time helping them develop personally because there is a lot of stuff that goes into being a professional athlete that's beyond the field that and that's just not even from like what I see happens a lot with athletes is they're like taught a bunch of stuff, and then there's like an assumption you got it. Like, Lord, that was a one-day workshop. You really thought. So just ongoing training, also like giving them access to like, oh, there's a team therapist, but we're gonna make sure that everybody is scheduled. Versus like you can go when you feel like ain't nobody going.
Right. That's a good point.
But do you think it's because they care more about the performance aspect of the athlete rather than the person?
I think that a person, so if they were truly looking for the best product output, which is like you want them to be the best on the field, it's like you have to develop both at the same time, because it's sort of like you can have the best engine, but if the rest of the parts of the car don't work well, the car at some point is going to break down. So you want it to, like, you need to be throwing it all at the same time. I think that there is an undervalued components to growing people individually because it's sort of like focus on the sport, and that means that you can like go to practice and you can like listen to watch film and you can do these things, and then that'll make you great. But then like if you're also struggling with interpersonal relationships, like everybody in my family's calling me all of a sudden, I argue with my girlfriend every day. I'm like, it's so many other things going on that you're like letting be neglected, which like if you gave it just a little bit more energy, you would get a whole better product overall. At least that's what I think.
But she just said something, right? And I want to touch on this because you also hear a lot of athletes who say their coaches don't allow them to focus on anything outside of the specific sport. But I also believe that building the personal brand gives your audience or the fans an insight to who you are as a person, into your humanity, so that way if you do mess up or you do something or you may have had a bad day, the fans actually know like the character or the person of the athlete. So how important is it for athletes to focus on also building their personal brand outside of the sport?
I think personal brand is huge. I think teams, leagues, that sort of stuff, I ain't gonna say they don't like it, but it gives them way more bargaining tools. So like if I am not necessarily your franchise player, but I build a big enough personal brand, I'm gonna be able to say, look at how many sales I got over here. Like, look how many people are looking me up. They're not looking for the team per se, they're looking at me, and it gives them more of a bargaining tool. So I don't think they like it, but personal branding is like, it is the thing that can create a much better payday outside of everything you're doing on the field, but it can also help enhance that as well.
So as you guys were talking, it just made me think about how you said, if athletes were to maybe go to therapy and deal with some of the other, things that they were going through, interpersonal relationships, and, maybe I had an argument with my girlfriend, and how that could perhaps, as a whole person, help them in their game. It made me just consider, and you guys think about this, if as an athlete I dealt with some of the other things that I have going on in my life, maybe it might make me realize that this sport isn't truly my passion. And as I get to the bottom of who I am and I self-actualize, I realize that there's so much more about me that is actually so much more worthy than me coming out here and competing or being that gladiator, as we've discussed. Right. So I think it could be a double-edged sword.
It is. And I see that often, and like it's sort of the reason why I became passionate about working with athletes, which was like I would help them get into some, let's just say a random opportunity, and then the opportunity sends them a check, and then they see the check and they're like, wait a minute, I didn't do nothing for the check, and I'm like, yeah, because that's sort of how that works. And then they're like, but then you see the light bulb go, and they're like, so I don't actually have to play anymore because like this amount is like enough to cover my lifestyle as I like it. But it helps them realize like, okay, I don't have to play, which means that if I play, it's because I want to play. And that's a different way of going into something as opposed to like, I gotta do this and I gotta make it because if I don't, like my family, everybody is relying on me and I'm gonna, this is my only way of earning money, the only way I know how to earn money. And so, and to take care of people and that sort of thing. And so, the more you get to those points where you're like, I found passion in something else, I found a way and a resource to earn, it will eventually show you who loves it and who doesn't. And then you'll have way more of like, I feel like you'd have more passion on the field too, because like there is no shortage of athletes. It's just like, now there are there's definitely dogs and mediocre athletes. Now I'm not gonna say that like.
No, I definitely want to touch on that in a second. Yes.
But it definitely will have. You would see a lot more shorter careers, I think, moving forward. Especially because there's way more money in it now on the front end. So you're like the guys who play for 10 and 20 years to make a lifetime career are making that in a year now. So I think there'll be shorter careers. People will, if they get more access to understanding who they really are as people and not who they've been developed to be. Especially, I look at sports like basketball, for example. A lot of the people who I know who recruit in basketball start recruiting them at 7. And so, like, we are grooming you to not give a damn about nothing else.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
Travel basketball. They're doing, like, eating, sleeping, drinking.
Yeah. And then, but what I realized in that paradigm shift, though, because I had a client who, he had never had any rejection in his life. He's like, I started playing basketball at 3 years old. I was an AAU champion. I was a high school champion. I was a college champion. I was a first-round draft pick. Highest paid player in the league. Woo, go. Great career. Where at year 12, he gets waived. First waiver of his entire career. And he goes into like a deep depression because if the only thing I value about myself is my ability to play and be great, if I can't play, now who am I? Was like the biggest thing. But then also like, so then he gets more opportunities, but then he had to fight for those opportunities. And he was like, you want me to try it out? How ghetto? And it made him not want to play at all. But now you're just like, you're at this crossroads of like, I really thought I was going to be playing for more years, but I wanted them to like want me, not like, I'm not trying out for nothing.
I got to work for it.
Yeah. And it was such a like mental battlefield for him until we really started digging deeper, like, okay, so what is the vision that you have? And then when we talked about it, him realizing like his vision was already unreasonable. Like, you've already played for 12 years, talking about you're going to play for another 10. First of all, that was unreasonable.
Absolutely.
And then just finding things that he was already interested in and like learning more. Because what I had to help him realize is like anything you do, you start as a novice and you have to give yourself grace to get through the things that happen to novices. I'm like, bro, if you were just now starting to play basketball again, you would be just as bad as you were when you were 3 or 4.
Right.
That's how it is with everything. And so you have to give yourself the grace to like grow and be like fail forward and all that kind of stuff. And then like he found the thing, which was he really, really likes helping keep athletes healthy. Because his biggest thing, his entire career, he was never injured because he was doing all of this extra stuff outside of practice to make sure that he was staying healthy. And so he's like, I'm super passionate about that. Like, what kind of things can I do to get involved? And I was like, okay, short of becoming a physical therapist, here are 7 things. And then like we just dug deeper, and he ended up opening 5 locations of these prehab centers, which is good.
So you're like in everything, it sounds like, because not only are you a businesswoman, but you're also, mom, and then you're also here helping these athletes really transition from, sports is my world to I can have another world, and I can branch myself out and do different things. And, my career isn't going to be 5 to 10 years or 2 to 3 years, depending on whatever sport it is. My career is longevity. I have things that I'm passionate about. I just never realized it because I never thought about it in that perspective.
Yes. So when I first started, it was very much helping people discover what they were passionate about and like giving them the vehicles to like go and do it. And then I realized that most people don't want to do the things they think they want to do. So, because like for instance, that particular situation got all these gyms going, all this stuff. It's all Instagrammable moments, and then once it's going, it's like, this is boring. Like, I don't want to do this for real anymore. So like, what's the new thing? And I'm like, okay, what you really want to do is you want to be a part of things without creating new jobs that are boring. And so like teaching them, that's how it became more about investing and like finding the right projects and the right operators and the right things versus like, oh, you want to start a restaurant? I'm gonna help you start a restaurant. No, you don't. You don't want to. Like so, but like nobody knows what they don't want until they've done it. And so putting them in situations where like, oh, you want to do that? I have a friend. He's gonna take you through the whole thing, and then they'll be like, oh yeah, no, that was too much. Don't like it. Because the one thing that I think is like a misnomer about life is like people teach you how to hustle, and then they'll teach you how to like we do a really good job of teaching people how to earn, but we don't do a really good job of teaching people how to be earners through investment as opposed to like earners through activity. And so I am more passionate about teaching you how to never get another job because like you work this hard to like make this much money, and like why in the hell would you want another job? Jobs are ghetto. I want you to like finally spend time with your family. I want you to finally spend time with yourself, right? And then like here are ways that you can earn money utilizing the work product of others, and then like let's get into things that like really drive you and you're passionate about. So if you're passionate about the community, all right, let's get involved with some development and like let's use your brand to bring more affordable housing or a grocery store to your neighborhood that never had a grocery store because apparently people don't realize that that's a thing. And so just all of these like how do we utilize social capital and capital to bring back more capital?
We spoke about this with Usain Bolt, right? Mm-hmm. Bad investment. An investment went wrong. Mm-hmm. So how can an athlete determine what's a good investment or a bad investment?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is like due diligence and having a team that's like really gonna go and vet things. Almost every time I get a call about an investment gone wrong, the people haven't even Googled the people's names. Because I'll be like, who is the person? Google, first page, bad review, bad review, bad review. You didn't even Google this person's name before you gave them money. That's the first step. The first step is like, don't trust anybody's word. Look them up. Make sure you look up their company's information. Make sure you look up, especially if they're asking you to be a passive investor, you need to make sure that they are doing things in the SEC compliant way, just like all of these little things. Then looking through the documentation that they gave you and make sure it makes sense from a reasonable standpoint. So like the one thing that I try to break things down in like sports terms because it's easier to understand, like, you know how a team works and things like that. So if a person tells you that they can do a whole team's worth of things by themselves, you have to think, is this possible? And ask the questions. So the biggest thing that I'm really training people on is like how to ask better questions. When you ask better questions, you get better answers. And then you'll be able to be like, because I find that once they hear that like red flag thing, they know it's wrong, but sometimes the intimidation of feeling like you don't actually understand what's going on, it'll make you be like, maybe it's just me and I'm tripping, versus being like, that don't make no sense. And just being okay saying no and like walking out.
So really quickly, and we'll get back to the dog and the mediocre person in a second, because I just can't leave that one. When you say if someone tells you they can do a whole team worth of things, so for those of you guys that are watching and you're trying to vet someone that you might want to invest with or a company that you might want to, come in with, can you give an example of someone that might say, I can do this, this, and this, and then you in your head are like, well, wait, that doesn't make sense.
So let's say, like, there's an agency and they want me to help them build a fund, and that agency creates, let's say they create e-com stores, for example, and they'll say like, right now we have 15 clients, and this is what we're doing. So we're trying to raise money so we can service 100 more clients. And I'm like, okay, so what's the process between then and now? How many people are on your team now? How many people do you anticipate having? And like, how's that going to change the margins? And they'll be like, oh, we're not going to hire anybody. We're just going to do it ourselves. And I'm like, do you have capacity to do that? Like how many more people can you take on right now and really think that that's not going to affect the quality of the thing? And then they'll say, but that's like the biggest problem that I see in most businesses is they either don't raise enough money to build a team that can actually service the thing, and that's just short-sightedness. It's like, oh, I see the big number in terms of revenue, and then like I don't want to have to share it with anybody else.
So as an athlete, if I were saying I wanted to invest in this company, or just anyone with capital, and as you're trying to do your due diligence, when you look at these companies, you're saying to them, think about, once I invest, how can I get my money back, right? Or even exit. Yeah. But you're talking to these companies, and if they don't have a clear plan about how they're going to grow,
right,
then that's a red flag.
It's definitely a red flag, especially because all you're really betting on, you're not betting on ideas, you're betting on the team's ability to execute the plan. And most people can sell ideas, but who can actually execute on the plan as promised? Very few people. And so you're really trying to get to the nitty-gritty of like, all right, that's the plan, okay, cool. And even if you told me to get to 100, we need to hire 25 people. Okay, what is your plan to hire 25 people? Because if you look, every single place got a for hiring sign, so obviously that's a problem. What's your plan? And so if they can't get you through the steps, you're like, okay, that sounds good. But in real life, how are we going to do it?
So that's key, knowing what questions to ask, making sure that, you're not just paying attention to what's said, because people are good salespeople, but what's their track record? If you have to Google, ask other people questions about reputation and ability to execute.
Yes. And then one of the biggest things that I ask is, I want to be connected, especially if it's a business that already exists. I want to be connected to two people: a person that complained, and a person who is like your ideal client. And I want to know why the person complained, and if you fix that process, and then your ideal client, how we're going to build upon this. Like, and they should, if they say everybody loves me, and I've never had a complaint, I'm going to say, okay, cool. You obviously don't have enough clients.
Right. Or you're lying.
Right. Okay, so back to the person or athletes, right? So we talk about athletes who have that dog in them, right? You watch athletes that are just either super aggressive, super hungry, they come out and they perform. Yeah. And then you have those athletes that are just mediocre. Mm-hmm. As you have, gone through track, as an Olympian, you've seen quite a bit. What would you say are some key indicators as you're watching people? What are you seeing that allows you to know, oh, that person has that dog in them?
Dogs don't make excuses. So like the number one thing to me that I've ever, like, I can tell if they're gonna be like, oh, that person is crazy, is, oh, it's raining. You skip practice because it's raining? Skip practice because you got your period? Like, those little things will be like, you tripping. Or, like, because every dog I know is like, yeah, it was raining. I practiced, though. I got it in. And I actually performed better because it was raining. Right. Or they're looking for opportunities to be better. Whether that's like, all right, well, I'm trying something else with my diet. Or like, oh, I did an extra set just because. And in my free time, I put up extra shots. And I did abs. And I'm also going to yoga when I get free. Like, those sorts of little things. And that was the biggest difference that I've seen. Like, I used to train out at XPE when I was still competing in Boca. And I was in the 6 o'clock group. Guy who comes late with a girl and half-asses the workout as if, like, you only work out for yourself, bro. Like, if you don't do it, you're just not gonna do it. That person, 9 times out of 10, has a shorter career than the guy who came early, who stayed late, who was always in the front of the drills. Like, and it's sort of like, this is silent, but you can watch it. And like over years, the same cycle. Like, bro, you booked a date to practice? Like, what's happening right? It's 6 o'clock in the morning. Why she even want to come?
Man. So
Where
do
she
you
thought
think
she was
it's
going?
something that is innate, or can that dog be taught? Is it something that is innate, or?
I actually feel like it's mostly learned.
Okay.
So like, naturally you can be gifted. Naturally you can be stronger, whatever the case may be. But like, over time, you will, like, learning discipline is more like a muscle than it is just a natural thing. And then the thing that keeps you more disciplined is like the confidence of seeing something go well because you did it. And then like that grows. I think that like, but it starts super young. So like most people start playing sports really young, or like at least if you're around my age, you grew up growing outside. And so like little things make you be like, oh yeah, I'm better than you. I'm gonna just keep pounding you just cause. Like you want to get on the line, you getting whooped. Like,
Yeah, bring it.
So
I
do
can
you
beat
believe
you.
that quote that says hard work beats talent if talent doesn't work hard?
very much, because I was that person.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was the person who like got by on talent all the way through college. So when I was young, I would race in the street and nobody could beat me. And then I ended up going to a high school where like everybody was really good. They started running track when they were like 5. So like that was not my story. I did gymnastics and played basketball and played tennis. And so I was getting whooped every day in practice for a little bit. I told my coach, I'm like, this ain't fun. I don't want to do stuff that I don't win. Like I'm a person who naturally gravitates to things that are easy for me. So if I'm not going to win, I'm going to go play something else. And so he's like, I think you should do hurdles. So that's sort of how I got into hurdles, from just being a sprinter. But then on top of that being the like, all right, so now I'm a hurdler and I'm doing better than most people. So I'm sort of just getting by. I'm doing enough. Like I am a person who, I have a really A-type personality. So that means like, if you give me something, I'm going to do it exactly as prescribed though. So don't expect me to do nothing extra. Like that's how I was very much my entire like youth. So like, oh, you got homework? All right, bet I'm gonna go through the motions and return you the homework in. I'm not doing nothing extra. I'm not studying nothing else. I ain't reading nothing else. Like that's how I am. So if the coach gives you a reasonable time to run and practice, like the superstar mindset people, they're gonna blaze through it and they're gonna do great. And I'm the person who's like leaning. That's the time you told me to run. I assume this is what you want. And so all the way through high school, get to college. My high school coach and my college coach were actually married, so he already knew this about me. So when they get there, I have a lazy spirit, and so I'm going to do just enough. And so the workout will be something crazy, like 10 300s, and I'll be like, great. So what do I have to do? Because I'm not doing that. Right. And he'll be like, okay, fine, you could do 120s. He was a crutch on my problem. Because
he was an enabler.
Yes, because I was going to do my job, which was to score points at conference. I was going to qualify for nationals. Like I was going to do the things. And so he's sort of like, she'll race herself into shape. He made me do every event on purpose because I really wasn't working out hard enough. But then when I became a professional, I had the hardest coach in history, and he was like one guy, big buff guy with a silver medal in the 110 hurdles. And so he's like, you work out like you made it already. This is terrible. And and then he's like, and you a little fat. So you ain't getting on the track no more till you lose 20 pounds.
Wow. No, you're fine.
So he made me run behind his car, humbly, with my boyfriend in the car. Run behind his car, he's beeping the horn. Speed up. Slow down. This is for like 3 weeks. I lose the 20 pounds. He's like, take me to the track. Now I'm out there by my.
Can we rewind? You said you lost 20 pounds in 3 weeks?
Yes. But that.
For all of you guys listening, like even for me, I needed her to rewind.
You don't want to do that workout.
Right.
When I tell
It
you,
sounds
so
intense.
I was running 2 miles behind his car, fartlek style. So that means you jog, you speed, you jog, you speed.
So it's intervals.
Intervals behind the car
Okay.
on Pembroke Road. So this is like a regular street. And lifting weights and eating at a calorie deficit. So
Completely unsustainable.
unsustainable.
So there's
yeah. I lose 20 pounds. Mind you, I'm super young at this point. So like the weight thing is easy as long as you don't drink and you're working out, right? So he finally lets me get on the track. He's out there yelling, bullhorn. It's just me and him. And I run the first rep, and then I lay on the ground because this is what I do all through college. Like in between reps, I'm laying on the ground to the next rep. He's like, "What's wrong with you? You got sickle cell?" And I'm like, "That's rude. People have sickle cell in real life." Like, no. And he's like, "Well, all right, then get up." And so he is the person though that can definitely take all the credit for who I became after that, because I needed to have him one-on-one to like turn me into a person who actually likes to work. And because the coach I have after him, I ended up, so I trained with him by myself for a whole year. I PR'd by a lot. I had a really good season. And then I moved to Orlando to train in a different group and to go to law school. And so that group had nothing but medalists, 5 people who ran my event, and my teammate from college. And so she knows me as like the person who makes excuses and all that. But like the thing that drove me in that particular group was it wasn't about the person in the front, it was about the person in the back. So if the person in the back doesn't make the time, everybody has to run another one. And I don't want to be the person who makes everybody else get punished. So I was like, just making it, and then I had somebody in the group tell me like, you're ranking and filing yourself in these workouts. Like you're not doing enough outside of practice. Like you really can do this, but you have to put in a little bit more work.
So say it again. You're ranking and
filing yourself, meaning like, so when I got there, I was probably like the 4th best person of the 6 of us in the race. And so like I just run behind the 3 people in front. Like I'm getting through the workouts, but it's not like I'm not doing more than is required.
So you didn't have that dog in you?
No.
Okay, you were real regular.
I was real regular.
Okay.
But I was surviving on talent. And so, but then that year, it made me be like, so I had 5 people in my race, and every single day, somebody feels great. So when you train in a big-ass group, somebody feels great every day. Like when I train by myself, I might be sore one day, I might be tired one day, whatever. But like in this group, if you don't want to get butt naked last in every rep, you're going to have to come with energy. And that like every single workout is like putting a little dollar in the bank towards what the goal is. And then you get to the end of the season, you're like, yo, I ran really fast this year. Like I met a whole bunch of goals just because we were iron sharpening iron every single day.
Everybody pushing each other.
Yes. And it turned me more into dog-like. Definitely still not a dog. It made me more dog-like. It made me more, because I am much more of a calculated scientist versus like a brute. Like you couldn't just be like there were some people in my group that's like run through the wall, and he's like run through the wall, and I'm like, how fast do I have to run to like not fall out? Like tell me, I need more information.
What exactly do you need me to do?
Yeah. Like if I run full speed, am I gonna get through the wall, or like what are we doing here? Like I'm just not the person that you can like blindly lead into like not me. So I feel like dog, like the true dog is like whatever he says, I'm here for it, and I'm like, some people lead you down dark paths where you get killed, and I don't want to go. So I'm more of like a balance.
I want to actually go back to one thing you said, because you said you really enjoyed your experience at HBCU, that you wouldn't trade it for the world, and then you got to UM, and it was like, whoa, well, night and day facilities. Yeah. So we saw earlier this year, Ed Reed got hired for about a split second by Bethune, and Ed obviously played at UM as well, so he got to reap those good good facilities, and then got to Bethune and realized, hey, it's really off balance here. So what do you think not just Ed or Shaq or whoever, like us as a people, what do you think we can do to help improve these HBCUs?
Whew, now that's gonna be a sermon. Okay, so I think the biggest thing is like we have to learn more about what it takes to run a university, because trying to compete with a school that has 1 million alive alumni is really hard because they're matriculating 30,000 kids a year per grade. So it's per year that comes in. And so to compare that to a school that brings in 5,000 students is pretty ridiculous because the size of our alumni base is small. But we also don't have a lot of this is again going back to what does investment look like. So most people don't realize that like an endowment is an investment that also looks like a donation. So you get the benefits of both. You give the money to the university, but you get a return on the money and you get to write it off. But because we're not taught that, we're just like, oh, Hampton has a huge endowment. But who's investing in it is not the us. It's not the alumni. The alumni just gives. And it's sort of like, you get a packet in the mail and it's like, you make a little bit of money, send us a check. And without the return or the understanding that there should be a return or that there's other ways to give, I think that's like huge. But just like giving in general, I think we're very small in terms of that. And then like also life gifts. So bigger schools, almost all of them have where their alums will be like, when you see somebody say, oh, they gave $20 million to the school, it's almost never cash. It's almost always that they've named the school as a beneficiary of some huge life insurance policy. And then they gave them access to the cash value during their life. We don't know that much about that, and we don't typically do that. So we also have the burden of having family that needs our down generational money. Right. So it's sort of like, it's such a hard thing to balance as it pertains to like how do you grow at the same speed or like learn to compete, especially when like Bethune is in the MEAC, or is it in the SWAC? They moved around a little bit. Yeah, but FAMU is in the SWAC now. Like I'm like, why are y'all moving around? It's confusing me. But Hampton is no longer in the MEAC. We are in the Big South. Nope, we're in the same one as Richmond. What is that called? Okay, CAA. Okay. And the reason why we moved to the CAA out of the MEAC is because CAA has a television show, a television network, and a lot more media attention. So we're able to get higher rankings for basketball as we go into the tournament. Right. Now, so although the schools in terms of competition are pretty level, what we got out of that was a 5x in revenue. Mm-hmm. And so like, it's so hard to, like the SWAC, for example, like although everybody was like giving Dion a hard time, they increased their revenue. Like he was doing everybody's job, like beyond the job of a football coach. He's like, all right, I'm gonna help y'all get a better contract for SWAC and all that. Like those are jobs of other people. And so, but it takes all of these components to like bring more money to have better facilities, because at the end of the day, if you look at it and you're like, I'm number one person to play basketball or football or whatever the case, and I'm coming out of high school, if I look at it from like a hotel perspective. If you've ever stayed at the Waldorf, you never want to stay at the Hampton Inn again. Right. And like, that's exactly what it's like. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, for the culture, great. So you want me to keep staying at the Hampton Inn? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Instead of saying like, okay, we have to figure out how to make this better, a better experience. I think the experience from like just a cultural standpoint and like seeing so many successful people and families, and like the best thing you can ever get out of attending an HBCU is like move-in day. So like my family does pretty well in general anyways, but like I didn't know a lot of other black families that were doing well. And so move-in day at Hampton, you see a whole bunch of families pulling up in Benzes and BMWs, and they're helping the kids get out. It's like the best scene ever, especially for a world that tells you that like Black is like the face of poverty versus like there are plenty of prospering families doing really well, doing great stuff in the community, and you're like, but y'all just keep showing that same picture.
It's true.
But do you think that's the experience that is giving when people do go to HBCUs?
What do you mean?
Like the poverty aspect, right? Because you hear people say like, okay, the textbooks aren't the best. They'll tell you the dorms are not the best. And then you do go to a PWI and it's just night and day. You're like, wow, the textbooks are crisp. The classrooms look better. The campus, the upkeep is better. So do you think
Well,
that's
so let me say this.
Yeah.
I'm a rattler. I'm with the fam. Orange and green to the core. There is something to be said about going to a school, like you said, I came from Evanston, a suburb right outside of Chicago, and going to Tallahassee, FAMU particularly, and seeing so many Black people from all around the world that were there to learn, but these are Black people that are so super smart. I mean, the best of the best in their classes from their, respective high schools. Now, okay, did we have the best facilities? We didn't. But the camaraderie, the culture, the ability to just be amongst people that look like you, that is unmatched.
But as an athlete, though, like she said, like you're the number one recruit, right? Is culture enough, though?
Well, that's a good question.
So I would say that you'll never hear an NFL player or NBA player who went to an HBCU tell you that they would trade the experience because they actually made it. Now, the other side of that is, if you've never experienced it, you have no idea. So from a facility standpoint, there's a lot to be desired. From even the dorm situation, I definitely only stayed on campus for one semester because I was like, can't do a lot. Can't do a lot. But what you get from, I call it, unfortunately, I call it something close to trauma bonding because you'll be complaining together like, oh my God, why are we going through this? But like, when I became, so 5 of us went to the Olympics together from Hampton. And at the time, there were 7 guys in the NFL and there were 2 guys in the NBA. And like, then we started so then you go from Hampton and you're like, okay, now I need to know all the people who went to HBCUs. Because at first you're like, we're anti-FAMU, we're anti-Del State. But then you're like, wait a minute, it's only like 14 of us. So we might as well be friends.
We need to get along.
And I would say across the board, you don't know what you don't know going in. And so although it's better to get massages and it's better to have a person who comes out and makes you protein shakes outside of practice, it is so, there are way more dogs at HBCUs though, like way more. Because you don't have, like when you don't have stuff and you can still make it, like having stuff makes you way better. Like that's just it. It was impossible for me to complain about anything. So like when I first started running track, I was on what I would consider to be like the Chitlin circuit. So you fly to Europe and then you take in trains between cities and you racing every 3 days. For a person who's been in great facilities, who's used to getting a chiro adjustment before every race, who's used to getting a massage between races, they struggled. Me, massage, baby, I got a roll.
And we made it do.
What?
Yes.
Yes, we survived on Golden Corral for every meal. And the coach being like, you better not get another biscuit.
Love it. So
And
listen,
not flying.
question. So because I know we could talk forever, and this has been amazing.
Yeah.
For our viewers, if they want to find you, because, I mean, coming from track and transitioning now in the business world as a new mommy, Where can they find you to learn more, to help them to ask the right questions?
Yeah, so the easiest, fastest way is Instagram. My name is Lala Hurdles 2 on Instagram. I'm also really active on LinkedIn. So LaVonne Idlette there. Twitter is my jam though. So that's where I am being the most myself and giving the most business stuff is Twitter, and it's just my last name, Idlette. My website is lalahurdles2.com. It's really keep it simple. You could get there a bunch of other ways because I think that owning a bunch of domains has a lot of value. But yeah, that's the easiest way to find me. I love to connect with people and add value wherever I can. Even if I can't help you, I'm gonna point you in the right direction.
That's awesome.
Love it. All right, so we got to wrap up, guys. That's our time for this week's episode. Please like, comment, share, subscribe. We're set.